Hello, and we're going to start with our June blocks. So as you can see, this is just a 2-page clue month, but there is a lot of sewing to do, and we're going to have some blocks at the end of this. So we're going to start the month by having our medium and our background. These are the 2.5-inch strips that you cut in January, and we're going to sew those together so that we end up with strips of those two joined together. Once that's done, you can then place that in your June bag, and you'll be able to have that for future months when it calls for it. Once we get through that, then the next thing I want you to do is go to your May bag, and you're going to pull out the half square triangles that we merged together last month, and we put clips on all of them. This time what I want you to do is, just for placement so that no one gets confused, is to go ahead and label them. So as you can see, there's going to be an 11, a 12, a 13, and a 14. So the reason we're labeling them is, as you can see, they match up with what we did in April. So if you'll go to your April bag and you'll pull all of your R blocks that are numbered from 1 to 10 from the April bag, these are the blocks that we're going to use, or the units that we're going to use in order to create the Rita block this month. Now, Rita's a complicated friend. She has an A side and a B side. So we're going to be making 2 blocks that represent both sides of Rita. In order to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to match up the actual schematic on the instruction page in order to get the blocks. What you're going to notice is, though, that the blocks spin. They're not identical, so we're not just making the same block and turning it. We're actually going to be making a block that has fans in different directions. So we're going to go ahead and start with the B block. So you can just take everything that's labeled and you'll be able to lay those out very easily and very quickly. So on the B block, what you're going to do is, these units are all 2.5 by 4.5. And if you sewed them so that at the end of your April, you were at a 2.5, 4.5, these are going to go together really, really easily for you. So all we're going to do is match them up, sew your 1/4 inch seam allowance, and everything should be great. When you come to the blocks that are 3 different fabrics, so you've got 2 half square triangles, and then you've got your main fabric. This is the one where things can get a little complicated. So let me grab one of these to show you. If you matched everything up properly, these will go together quite easily. You'll just match them up like so, and you can check them. So what we're going to do is just check. We put our, we do a pinch at a 1/4 inch, and then open that up, and we're going to see if it's going to match up perfectly when we sew it. So you can actually do some pre-work just to make sure that if you do sew a true 1/4 inch, and you can measure that with your ruler, and then put a pin in to check them. That way you won't have any surprises when you go back and open them up. So we'll put those back. So you're going to have 4 units, which are 2, 2, 2, and 2. So you've got 8 of the 2.5, 4.5 that become the 4-inch blocks. Now these should all measure, when you're done, at 4.5 inches. Okay, and as long as they measure 4.5 inches, these are all going to go together, and you're going to have an 8.5 inch square when you're done. Now, there is a good chance that you could have some issues when it comes to sewing these together, because you will have seams that want to go a couple different directions just because of the complexity of the blocks. As I told you in the initial email that went out, this is not an issue for me because I've come up with a workaround. So I use a pair of scissors and fray check, which is something that I mentioned as being optional. So as you can see, this seam, when it was sewn, and this seam, when it was sewn, are now in opposite directions. So I've got a seam that's going to fight with itself. Now you can take an iron, you can mash that seam if you like, but I find that if I can get both of these to lay flat, it makes it easier for my quilter, and it gives me a better finish across the top. So what I do is I take my scissors, and I'm going to caution you, do not get near that sew line whatsoever. But what I'll do is I will cut into the corner. Let's see if I'll help my cameraman here. I will cut into the quarter, but I will finish, this is 1/4 of an inch, I'm gonna finish about an 1/8 to a 1/16 of an inch short of that corner. Okay, so I'm gonna snip here, and then I'm gonna let that thing just flop open. I will take my fray check, and all I'm gonna do is hit that intersection with a dot of glue. The glue is gonna dry clear, and it's the fray check stop spraying on fabric. So that's the fray check that you want to buy. They actually make a couple of different products, but this is the one that works pretty well for me. This is going to dry, and as soon as it is dried, and this one already has, it's naturally just going to want to fold open. So when you hit this with your iron, which in this case, we're going to fold this open. When you just hit this with your iron and give it a quick press, it's going to lay beautifully flat. And there's going to be no sign that this had actually been flipped open and trimmed, but you cannot get close to that seam line whatsoever. So if you want to go back to the January clue and take a look at that, there's some up close photographs, and I'll also post some on Facebook so you can see how that works. So once you have sewn that seam and you've pressed these, and here's the other thing. So on my show quilts, I do this all the time, and no judge has ever caught me doing it. So it's one easy way without having to constantly figure out which way to iron or press things to make sure that they work. So once you have sewn 2 and 2 together, now we want to be able to marry those together. So I do recommend that you press them so that they lay flat as you get ready to put the last one together. Now, this is going to be handled similarly to what we did previously, in that, get that out of the way, you're going to notice that this intersection comes together. You're going to put your pin right into that point. When you flip it over, it should come out, this one's off just a smidge, it should come out in that perfect point spot, which is there. Then what you're going to do is take that same long pin, and you're going to insert it into the point on the underside, which is here, okay? You're gonna push that long pin all the way through, and as we shared the last time, let me grab an orange pin to make things easier. You're going to insert this horizontally right up next to that pin, so it comes right out there. You don't want to stab and pull up, because it's going to shift that point, and we want that to stay as flat as possible. So here again, you want to just go in on the horizontal, you can feel it with your thumb, so that those 2 pins are going to lock that center in place. Now you're also going to have to do it on all 3 points. So that one came through, and then we're going to go and slide right into that point. Once again, insert our pins. You'll notice that I'm not worried about the end of my blocks at this time. That's really the last pin that I'm going to stick into the block, because that should match up evenly. As you can see, it does. Now, down here I have a little issue because this one is flopped the wrong way. So I'm going to just move it back, give it a quick finger press. I'm going to look for that intersection, pull through. I'm going to find the underside intersection, which is that nice point, insert there as well. I'm going to push the pin through. And then I actually grab it on either side of the pin so that I know where that pin is and that it is perpendicular. I'm going to put my pins in on either side before I worry about that last block, which is going to be here. So I've got 3 pins and they are sitting upright, if you can see that. And that's how I want them. That's how I want them to go into the machine. So what I'll do is I will literally take and flip them so that they lay flat. I will insert this into my presser foot, and then literally I will just stitch until I get to about 1/4 of an inch from that pin, and then I'm going to slowly start to pull it out. I'm going to stand it up, and then as that needle gets closer, when I am literally 1 thread away from that pin, I'm going to pull it out and I'm going to continue stitching until I get to the next one. I'm going to repeat the same process. When you do that, this is what you should see in the end. So the points match, the sides match, everything comes together, and this makes a really beautiful fan. So there are two different directions, as I said. The fan spins in opposite directions, one for A and one for B. So look at your instructions and it should be very, very clear for you. So I think you're gonna have a great month, a pretty easy month if your blocks or your units were all the proper size going forward. And I look forward to showing you what we're gonna do in July, which is, I think, even more fun than what you're seeing this month. So thanks a lot and we'll see you next month.